Hi, I'm Don Cantor, former co-director of JLIC at Johns Hopkins University and current director at the Richmond Jewish Learning Experience in Richmond, Virginia.
And I'm Alex Ozar, co-director of JLIC at Yale University, and this is the Torah JLIC podcast. JLIC supports thousands of young Jews in their college years and beyond, providing them with the nourishment they need to sustain an upward trajectory of Jewish commitment and growth as they enter the broader world. And the animating engine of that effort, that has always been and will always be Talmud Torah, a high-level, richly meaningful, thoughtfully creative Torah learning, ambitiously attuned to the realities of where our students are. On the Torah JLIC podcast, we hope to share some of that Torah with you. Thanks for listening.
Well, Alex, it's our first podcast of the winter, and I think people can hear it.
Yeah, look, this is part of the deal with JLIC is we show up to work no matter what, even if we're both getting over terrible colds. It's just the way it's what has to happen, man.
All right, I'll try to mute myself before I cough, but no guarantees about whether or not I'll be able to pre-mute for my daughter who's sitting sick at the other side of the table.
Yeah, I'm ready. You ready?
Let's go.
You know, there are a lot of really big ticket, major, obvious problems, challenges with either attending or sending your kids to secular college. You know, people worry about who will our kids date? Will they, worst case scenario is intermarriage, worry about exposure to foreign currents of thoughts, nefarious ideas that can draw people away from a Torah true lifestyle. There's anti-Semitism on college campuses now, as some of you may have heard. That's a real challenge. I want to talk about something very specific, very focused, but which I think actually crystallizes some of the, I think, most interesting and generative and like productive challenges of going to a secular college. What I want to talk about today, Don, is football, college football. And I'll talk about it specifically from my experience here at Yale University. I don't think it's a
A
surprise to
football
anybody.
powerhouse.
A football powerhouse. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that our students here are a little on the nerdy side of the range. Although apparently the basketball team did pretty well this year, and so did the football team. Like made it to whatever the big tournament is. I don't really understand these things, but it was a big deal. So like, here's the story. Nobody pays any attention to the football team throughout the year, right? Because who cares? It's just people have much more important things to worry about, and it's not interesting. But once a year, Yale plays a game against our major rival, this like small, dinky liberal arts college up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, Harvard or something. And yeah, whatever, they're fine. So the Yale Harvard game is a big deal socially. Everybody goes. And everyone makes a big deal out of it. The truth is, it's usually during Yale's. It is always during Yale's Thanksgiving break. And yet, every other year when the game is at Yale, everybody stays, even though it's already break. Everybody hangs out for that Shabbos because everybody wants to be a part of the scene. It's a great time. A ton of students come down from Harvard. There's all kinds of shtick. It's a lot of fun and like just a lot of good, clean camaraderie around something fundamentally stupid.
How dare you?
Yeah, look. And here's the deal from a Jewish perspective. The game is on Shabbos. It always is. It always will be. It starts at 12 o'clock on Saturday. And this presents certain obvious problems. Now, let's take for granted right now, as is true, that we can solve for all of the obvious halachic problems. Let's say we can solve for the Eruv issue and how you get your tickets there, and in fact, we can solve that problem. It's not a big deal. And assume there's no technical violations, there's no malacha involved in actually going to the game and being there. It's fine. You can get all that covered easily. But then, and so Don, from our perspective as JLIC rabbis, educators, people responsible for the state of our students' souls and their futures as members of the Jewish community and their futures as people committed to Torah and mitzvot. Student comes to one of us and say, Rabbi Alex, everyone's going to the game. I want to go to the game. Is it okay for me to go on Shabbos? So the question is, how do we react? How do we help them in this moment? How do we help them think? So now look, there's a group of students. There are multiple contingents here. There's one group who won't ask that question because obviously they're not going to a football game on Shabbos. It's just obvious to them it's incompatible with their understanding of their commitments to Torah and mitzvot, their understanding of what Shabbos is. They will not go to a football game on Shabbos, even if everyone else is doing it. They will stay back and hang out with the few other nerdy firm kids who aren't going, and they will do their own thing, and that'll be that. Or they won't stay for the Shabbos at all. They'll just go home, go somewhere else. But they're not. It's just not on the table for them, and that's a significant number. And for them, helping them is easy and direct because I'm also obviously not going to the game, and I'll be there for the weekend. I'll participate in the camaraderie and the shtick and have a good time with it. But I'm staying back. We're going to hang out and do our from nerdy thing. Then there's a group of students who would never ask the question because they're obviously going and they don't care, and that's what it is. But there are a lot of students who do come really genuinely looking for guidance. They really are genuinely confused and anxious and uncertain about how they're supposed to approach this. They feel very powerfully drawn to go to the game. And honestly, for being honest, even if I say, which I will, I don't think you should go, they're going to go. I know they're going to go. They know they're going to go. They're not really asking a yes or no question, but they are looking for guidance. And the question is, what can and should we be doing for them in that moment? How can we help them? How can we lead them?
Can you tell me what it means they're looking for guidance if they're not going to listen to what you tell them?
It's a really fair question, and that's part of what I want to work through. Like, I do think, for some of them, it is just, Rabbi, I'm hoping you can tell me something that'll mollify my conscience, which is a little bit of what I'm going to do to a point. But also, I think there is a real integrity to, look, this is what's happening. I don't really see myself making a different decision. Maybe I'm open to that if you really made a good enough case, but I don't actually see myself making a different decision. But at the very least, I want to understand what the stakes are. And I want to be doing whatever I'm going to do on the basis of a sound grounding in our tradition, what Torah mitzvahs actually demand of me. And I want to know, again, whether I'm going to do the wrong thing or not. I want to know what that should mean and how I should think about it. And this is, I think, where we'll go for a lot of these students. It's going to be, well, given that I'm doing this, is there anything I can do? Is there a better or worse? Are there better ways I can do this, or better ways I can approach this and think about it in ways that'll be more conducive to a subsequent lifetime of commitment to Torah mitzvah and a full observance of Shabbos?
Okay, great. So I think it's really important to think about what it means to be helping people, even though they're not going to listen to what the optimal advice is.
Yeah. So, and again, I think, we're talking about what it means for students to put themselves in this environment, attending a secular college, despite their very genuine and real commitment to Torah mitzvot, and putting themselves in an environment where they're going to be challenged and tested in all kinds of ways. There's a real sense in which I think we have to be honest and clear that from perspective, this is a b'diavad situation. They are entering into a predicament in which they're going to be pulled in different directions, and they're going to have to make choices. And the question is, can we do that in a way that is actually helpful and productive and moves them in the right direction and equips them to face the very real challenges and predicaments that they're going to face throughout their life? Take advantage of the fact that they're facing these challenges rather than just allowing it to consume them or subvert their commitments. I do think it's very important, and Chazal deal with this also, already classically. Well, what do we do if we know that most people are not going to take our advice? And there are certain cases it's qualified later, but Chazal say mutav shiu shogin v'hayu mezid, and it's better not to tell people that they're going to be in violation of a principle, so that they violate it unintentionally rather than having them violate it intentionally. Again, this is qualified. It's only derabbanan things. It's only a certain class of things. But there's a sensitivity. We have to understand that not everybody's going to do the ideal thing all the time. And our responsibility as leaders, as educators, as teachers of Torah, is to help real people in real situations deal with their actual pressures. And so I do want to say, like, and I think this is very important as I work through my own approach to this. One temptation is one kind of current I could fall into is to completely hide my real position on this. And like just say, look, I know most of you are going to go to this football game, and it doesn't help me to say that I think you shouldn't because you're going to go anyway, and that creates a bad dynamic. So I shouldn't even betray that at all. I should keep that hidden. But that I think is problematic on two counts. One, it betrays the commitments of those students who do want to hold to that line, and there are a meaningful number of them who do want to say, no, we should hold this line, and we should not go to this game because we should honor Shabbos fully, and we need our rabbi to stand by us and to say and affirm that that's meaningful and right. That's piece one. And piece two is I just actually think it's true. It's right. We should hold this line. And I think it's important to communicate that and not water it down, not dilute it. But then it becomes a question of, well, okay, so then how do I communicate that in a way that's actually going to be effective and helpful, and then leave space for providing guidance to people who aren't going to follow that advice. And so there's
Can I
a
stop you for a
multitude.
second
Yeah.
and just point out that it seems like when you're talking about the concept of mutav sheyu shogin volume is eating and wondering whether you should just not say anything, it seems to be protective or defensive and trying to prevent any bad things from happening. But it seems that initially the goal was more than just preventing something bad from happening, but how to help people grow, even if they're not at the point where they're going to be making the optimal decisions from an objective halachic standpoint.
Yes, I think it's really good to tease those two apart. I think the first one, just avoiding do no harm, I do think is like an important baseline to start with. But I think if you get that right, you start there, then you really can start thinking about, okay, well, given where we are, and now I have a clear-eyed grasp of reality that I'm honest about and clear about and committed to, and I'm embracing because this is where we are. Then I can start thinking about, well, are there ways in which we can actually make this productive and helpful and good, such that at least from a long-term perspective, I can provide guidance that will lead to an ultimately fuller commitment to Torah mitzvos and Shabbos in particular. And my sense is it really is possible. And there's always the possibility for self-delusion here, where you just say, given that everything is not ideal, so you just try to turn that into something that's good instead of just acknowledging that it's bad, which maybe. But my sense and from what I've seen, my experience and having these conversations, and again, like there are a lot of students who would never even bother asking about these things because they don't care. There are students who really do care, and they really are thinking, and they really do want to reflect, and they do really want to take seriously the implications of what they're doing now for their long-term commitments to Torah mitzvot. And I do think there's really important work we can do there. That's what I want to work on.
All right, Alex, take us into the Makor road over here.
Okay, right. So what do we actually do? I'm going to share what I actually do, and with the proviso that I don't think I have this balance right. And precisely to say, like, and this is going to be part of the core of the message here, is these are fuzzy questions. I think they're intrinsically fuzzy. And I'm going to try to show very quickly from the halachic sources, these are fuzzy questions. And so I don't think I've gotten this balance right. I've been doing this for 8 years. I do it every year. It happens at Yale every other year, but still the questions come up. I don't think I've gotten the balance right. And I think every time we need to keep working on doing it better. This is where I've settled for now. I make clear, I don't issue a fatwa. There's no clear edict that says Rabbi Alex says this is Ozar. I make very clear in my public messaging around this what my real feelings are. Nobody who's interested in knowing what I think can have any question that I'm staying back, and that is what I think the optimal decision should be. So I do make that clear, and I think it's very important to establish that as a baseline. And again, anybody who asks, like, okay, but bottom line, should I go? The answer is no, you shouldn't. And the reason you shouldn't go is like, we're gonna go through some halachic sources, but it should just be obvious why you shouldn't go. This is not compatible with a proper and full experience of the sacredness of Shabbos. You're not going to experience Shabbos as Shabbos if you are in a stadium full of people chanting and screaming about people playing football. Be honest, it is not going to feel like Shabbos to you, even if we can control for everything else. At the very, very least, this will not be the best way for you to honor and enjoy Shabbos as Shabbos. It will obviously be better for you to stay back and learn Torah or play board games with your friends in the Hillel building, and for it to feel like your normal Shabbos routine and maintain an atmosphere and environment of Shabbos. That should be obvious.
To what extent do you think your message is diluted by the fact that you just don't like football in the first place? And your Yale students may be nerds, but they're not that nerdy. And yeah, of course you're gonna say that you shouldn't go to a football game on Shabbos. You probably would tell them they shouldn't go to a football game at all.
So yeah, the football thing in particular, I actually, and I do want to come to that and touch on it very lightly. I'm not anti-sports. I want to be clear about this. I'm a big hockey guy. I like baseball. Football is the violence in particular I don't love, but I'll be honest, I enjoy it. I like. I would go. I would 100% go to the game if it were on a Sunday. It's a good time. I totally get it. And I get it both from an aesthetic perspective. I think there's something beautiful to the game and the forms of human excellence that it brings out. I think there's something very genuine to appreciate there. And I think there's something real and good and even virtuous about the community. There can be something, it can become vicious too. But the community that's built around these kinds of enjoyments can actually be really great and important and vital to a full human life. And actually, I want to validate that, but I want to validate it in a way that like is critical and reflective, because these things also all have dark sides. The joking, half joking, it's serious also, about you know football in particular is being ridiculous, and it is ridiculous, and the violence and the like constant injuries, and the fact that it's just obviously a terrible idea. I think is an important part of the conversation, which is sort of in the background here, but we're going to leave to the side. I think it's a different issue. Football is obviously prohibited and shouldn't be allowed in civilized society, but given that it is, I have to take it seriously. And so, look, once we get to now the class of student who is coming and saying, look, we're going to go, but we want to understand this. What's the story from a halachic perspective, from a Jewish spiritual perspective? So what I want to say is there are real halachic pressures against doing this kind of thing, or that should at least make us hesitate very strongly and think very carefully about what we're doing. But also that actually internal to the halacha is the contrary pressure, and some pressure to allow this kind of thing. And it's not at all clear how that, in any kind of rigorous like statutory way or formalistic way, how this should come out. So the Gemara on Shabbos, the earlier Midrash Halacha says, Daber Davar versus Yishaya, the way you talk on Shabbos, your speech, and that includes like your entire discursive environment, is what's going on. The way you talk on Shabbos should not be the way you talk during the week. You should have a different. Your focus should be different. Your mindset should be different. Everything should feel different. The Gemara talks about you should walk differently. You should, in the same passage, you should dress differently. Everything about Shabbos, there are all the rules, the prohibitions, but on top of that, you have a positive, there's both a negative, you shouldn't do the weekday things, and a positive thing. You should ensure that Shabbos feels like Shabbos, and that you are focused on spirituality and transcendence and Torah and mitzvot, and the community that's built around that, and the family structure is built around that, and it should feel distinctive and special and sacred and transcendent. And from that perspective, and it's obvious something like football is not okay, but already in the Rishonim, so you start getting a discussion about, well, there are a few different classes here. There is just like discussions of current events, like milchamot. Back in the day, people used to talk about who's fighting who, what the local magistrate is doing, the same kinds of things, current events, what's going on. And so the Shulchan Aruch in the beginning of Siman Shin Zayin, it says, this is in the Ramah, so Shesipur Shmod v'divrei chidushim hu oneg lahem. So the Ramah says, like, if talking about current events and what's going on is something that you enjoy, mucho v'sapram with Shabbat kamo b'chol. Then you can talk about the things that you enjoy talking about. These are neutral things. They're not like anti-sacred things. They're not bad things. They're just profane, neutral stuff. And look, ideally, you would be focused in just learning Torah all day and only talking about Torah. But we also want you to have a good time on Shabbos. We want you to enjoy yourself. That's part of what Shabbos is. It's a focus on the sacred, but also about having a nice time. And so if you enjoy talking about current events, you should talk about current events. The Trumas Hadeshen, and this gets picked up in various forms. Actually, I think it's based on a smog earlier. Talks about I think it's Bacharim mitkapsim uveratzim, like young people who like jumping and running. It's very direct to the case. They enjoy jumping and running either for their own sport. They enjoy having a good time playing in athletics, or they want to go watch something. They want to run to go see something that they would enjoy seeing. And the Trumas Hadeshen says, look, normally, ideally, we would say you shouldn't do this because it's not Shabbosdik. But if you enjoy it, it's part of your enjoyment of Shabbos. We can't tell you that you shouldn't do it if that's what you enjoy. Even earlier, already the Yerushalmi is saying, Bekoshi, hitiru chachamim ledaber b'Shabbos. Like ideally, you wouldn't talk at all on Shabbos because you should be entirely focused on your relationship with God and the divine and transcendence and Torah and everything. But obviously, we permit you to talk on Shabbos because you're a human being, and part of Shabbos is enjoying yourself as a human being. I'm going to flesh out this picture a little bit more just to like get the whole picture out there. You get a secondary debate. What if, and this the Ramah says, what if you don't particularly enjoy talking about current events, but the people you're talking to enjoy talking about current events? And this is a very easy thing to imagine. You're at Shabbos Kiddush, and people come over to you and they start talking about politics, and politics is the last thing you want to talk about right now. And it's like, it's Shabbos, give me a break. But you know that they enjoy it. So is it okay for you to talk about it, given that it's not Oneg for you, but maybe it's Oneg for them? So Rama says, look, ideally, no. And that's based on the Trumas Hadeshen. He says, you really shouldn't. And you should be honest, like, is this something that you are genuinely enjoying, or are you just going along with what the other people are doing? And this is we'll spell it out. I think has very direct implications for our case. But the Taz says, look, well, if you don't enjoy it at all, you shouldn't do it. And you should find a way to get out of the conversation. But if you enjoy that the people, your interlocutors enjoy, you enjoy their enjoyment, and you're generous and charitable, and you want them to have a nice time, and you care about them, and then you enjoy them having a nice time, that's fine too. Because that's part of Oneg Shabbos is giving other people a nice time, and you enjoy it enough, and you're virtuous enough that you can get yourself to that state where it's not a tircha, it's not a burden to you. You really do care. And so I think like this is the first layer in helping our students think critically about what they're doing. And a lot of them, as you said, these are not diehard Yale football fans. They're just not. They don't know anything about Yale football. They don't know anything about football in general. This is not their thing. The reason they are going to this game is because everyone else is going to this game. This is what everybody on campus is doing. It's what all their friends are doing. And they don't want to miss out on the experience because that's just what's happening. That's what everyone is doing. And so the first thing I want to tell them is, like, if you're going to go, the permission structure, the heter for this, is that you think of it as Oneg Shabbos. This is something you're going to enjoy as a part of your Shabbos experience, and that's legitimate and okay. Again, there's some pressure against this, but also internal to halacha, we can't prohibit it because it's actually vital. But you need to be honest with yourself. Do you actually enjoy this? Do you actually want to do this? If you are really just feeling social pressure that like you can't be the one person who doesn't go, but you actually are going to hate it and feel guilty and upset and anxious and just not want to be there, you should really maybe think about not going. And then if you are going to go, does this feel like something you can actually genuinely enjoy? Or does it at least feel like something where you really are feeling a part of a community? There's a group of people, and ideally the group of people who will also understand Shabbos, but there's a group of people who can experience this as a part of their own Shabbos in a real way. And you could be contributing to that and feeling a part of that and do that intentionally and thoughtfully and mindfully. And so that becomes, it's a question, like, is that the case? But it's also a challenge. It's like, well, if you're going to go, approach it that way. Approach it as like that we have a group of people who care about Shabbos, but also want to be at this football game. How can we together make this feel like a part of our own Shabbos?
Okay, hang on one second.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that what you're saying is that it's possible that for some people, going to the Yale Harvard football game could be considered Oneg Shabbos.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that's the approach they have to take. If this is going to be Mutzer for you, that's going to be part of the approach. Is a like, do I enjoy this at all? And I think like, can I enjoy this as a part of my Shabbos experience? It's like one of the fun, nice things that I have the space and time to do right now because it's Shabbos. I'm gonna do it with my Shomer Shabbos friends, and we're gonna approach it that way.
So that means some people should be going to the Yale Harvard football game on Shabbos.
So still, I think it's obvious. I'm gonna make clear this is not the best way. A much better way to do Oneg Shabbos would be to sit around with your friends and play board games. You know, even better than that would be to learn Torah on Shabbos afternoon. That's obviously better because there are going to be a lot of things that are going to be pulling you out of a Shabbos mindset if you're at a football game.
But how subjective is it then? Because if I don't particularly enjoy learning Torah, or maybe I generally do, but I'm going to be so upset that I'm missing out on this football game, learning Torah will be kind of a drag. Does that mean that it's still better for me to go?
It's like I don't think there's a formulaic answer to these questions. Like people have to be honest with themselves about what their experience is actually going to be, what they're actually committed to, what it's actually going to feel like, what they're actually trying to accomplish, and what kind of care they're taking to make these experiences right. Again, like go back to the case discussed more or less explicitly in the Ramah. You're at Kiddush, and your friend comes over to talk to you, and they bring up politics or whatever, and you're asking, is it okay for me to stay in this conversation even though I don't feel like this is conducive to my experience of Shabbos? And there's a real set of questions here. It's like, can I experience this as my own Oneg Shabbos? Can I experience the like secondary contribution to their Oneg Shabbos as part of my Oneg Shabbos? And like there can that answer might be no, and the answer might be yes, and that's going to be a question that you have control over. Like, it's a task. Can I bring myself to a state where I feel like if I'm going to be stuck in this conversation, this is what I'm doing. Obviously, you could walk away. There's nothing stopping you. But if you feel like you can't get out of it because that's just what's happening, that's what your friends are doing, that's what they're talking about, the challenge then becomes, can I get myself to a state where I experience this as Oneg Shabbos?
Well, there's a difference because in that case, it's a matter of like, should I try to be polite and continue a conversation with this person? And in the case that we're talking about is, am I going to make a choice to go to this game that I really want to go to?
Yeah, sure. The in the Ramaz case where like there's something about there's an altruistic element. It's like I'm doing this out of deference to the people around me, and that probably doesn't obtain in the football game situation, except in a very abstract way, where like there are other people there who are going to the game, and it will mean something to them if you don't go, and it'll detract from their experience. Like that's very abstract, and I think pretty tenuous as a justification. But I actually like in that situation at Kiddush, like I think there are a lot of situations like this. Like you really could walk away. There's nothing stopping you. You could easily go talk to somebody else. They won't be offended. And like, if you really care, if you really want to prioritize your own spiritual rectitude, you can do that. That's up to you. And there's a real choice here. And there's like, you don't have to go to the kitchen at all. You can go talk to somebody else. You can go do something else. But you decide, I'm going to be in this situation where I'm going to be pulled out of my focus on the transcendent, and yeah, you make that choice. The other strand of this I want to bring up. This is like even more abstract and extra. Is the term. There's a debate that shows up later in the Shulchan Aruch. I think it's 70 Zion about studying like other chachamot, like other forms of wisdom other than Torah. And from the Rambam's perspective, like, nope, you shouldn't do that. You should only be studying Torah. It's like Shabbos should be a day where there's an exclusive focus on Torah and mitzvos and our relationship with Hashem, and If there's going to be an intellectual focus, there should be, it should be on that relationship. And so it should be on Torah. And we shouldn't be focused on studying biology or philosophy or whatever else. And so the Shulchan Aruch says, "Asur l'mo b'Shabbos v'yom tov zulas b'divrei Torah." You're not allowed to learn anything else other than Torah. Afilu b'sifrei chachamot asur. Shulchan Aruch says you can't learn even other forms of wisdom, even though. And so the thought here is, well, like other forms of wisdom is much better than just talking about current events or just vain things. There's some acknowledgement that other forms of wisdom have some real spiritual value, but still, that's for the weak. But not on Shabbos. On Shabbos, it should be a pure focus on the transcendent. V'yesh mi shematir. But also there are those who allow it. And according to those, you're allowed to look at the astrolabe, which is this old astronomical instrument. I think was actually a Jewish invention. And so you're allowed to do that. And there is this allowance, and this does become the prevailing view, is an allowance to focus on non-Torah intellectual subjects on account of their genuine spiritual value. And from for our students who are in university or like a broadly Torah, modern Orthodox perspective, like giving some, but this is very old, there's already in the Rishonim, like recognition of the real spiritual value of these things. So it's fundamentally allowed. You can use your astrolabe. You can study. My son likes reading an atlas. You can read your atlas. You can read your philosophy books. Not just if that's what you enjoy on Shabbos. I think it's not just about Oneg. But I actually think this becomes, in a secondary way, a part of the avoda of Shabbos. Like Shabbos should be a time when we are focused positively on working on our spiritual state. And so the core of that should be learning Torah. The periphery of that can be developing our intellect in other ways and other pursuits. And if you can do that, and honestly, like it's a part of your spiritual regimen, is to focus on other intellectual pursuits, then that's a part of the Shabbos experience too. That's a part of the work on Shabbos. As I said earlier, I actually do believe this even about football, which again is fundamentally ridiculous and morally problematic. But it is also beautiful. The coordination involved, the work involved, there's artistry in football, and we don't usually think in Jewish terms about athletic excellence, but there is something like really impressive humanly about it. I think there's real spiritual value to it if you approach it that way. It can obviously also be crude and bad and crass and vicious in all kinds of ways. But I do think it's at least possible in this very snooty way to approach something like a football game as something with real spiritual value, and both from the perspective of the people doing it and like appreciating the work and artistry that they put into it, and from your perspective as a spectator of like actually appreciating the forms of spiritual excellence that are exhibited in something like a football game. And so I think like in addition to, well,
Alex,
if I'm going to go to,
is this you idealizing a way in which somebody might be able to appreciate football in what we might call in a more higher form of appreciation, or is this a realistic way in which you think the students are approaching the game, and therefore it justifies their Oneg Shabbos experience in attending that game?
And if the question is this what students are actually doing when they go? The answer is no. They're getting really drunk beforehand and on the way, and then they're hanging out with their buddies and yelling and screaming and having a good time. Sure, fine. I get that. I know that. My job is to help them think both in the present and in a long-term way about what it would look like to do these things in a way that like gives them a horizon of genuine Jewish meaning. And so it's a challenge. It's not a justification. I'm not saying like it's okay for this reason. I'm saying part of your challenge, if you're going to do this, if you're going to take this on, which is like real significant cost and pressure to your experience of Shabbos. But if you're going to do that, I think part of the story is I want you to try to focus on the like forms of spiritual value that are exhibited here. And that's a part of the package of how can I maintain a sense that I'm doing this in a way that's consistent with my experience of Shabbos, but not only consistent with it, that maybe even like on some level, some very small part of what you're doing there, that experience actually contributes to your experience of Shabbos and to the work of Shabbos. And the question is, like, can you do that? Can you do that at all? Can you like get some foothold in that such that it like shapes what you're actually doing there? And can you make this into a spiritually productive experience that'll actually, maybe long term enrich your observance of Shabbos the week after? And so 20 years from now, when you're living in, your modern Orthodox community, wherever, and you don't have the pressures of everybody in your community going to a football game on Shabbos, can this leave you in a better place? Can you be enriched for having done this work when you were under these pressures?
Is it fair to suggest that proper attitude towards this could be that right now I'm in a place where Oneg Shabbos for me is going to this game, and since that's the case, I should try to maybe at least appreciate it in a way that's a little bit higher than merely getting drunk and watching people kill each other. And in addition to that, I should maybe aspire to develop my Oneg Shabbos palate so that in the future, this isn't as attractive a thing for me to do on Shabbos.
I'm not sure. Yeah, like what I don't want, and I think the real danger here is creating like an outright permission structure where I've actually told you and helped you justify the like doing this more. Like, find other kinds of games I can go to. Now that Rabbi Alex has given me all these ways to think about how great it is to go to a football game on Shabbos and how consistent, conducive it is to Oneg Shabbos and to the work and votive Shabbos, like, because it's a spiritual pursuit. I'm going to find all these other things that I'm going to do. No, I do think you're right that, my hope here is that forcing you to think critically and reflectively about, well, what am I actually trying to accomplish? Can I fit this into a rubric of genuine Oneg Shabbos? And like really asking that question. Obviously, like I'm hoping that the answer will turn out to be no. Like, I'm actually hoping they'll go to the game because they're gonna go anyway, and then like approach it with this like, okay, I'm gonna like try to make this as Shabbos-tic as I can. And again, I do give them advice like wear extra nice Shabbos clothes, make sure it like really feels like look you're gonna look out of place because like everyone else is gonna be wearing whatever and you're gonna be wearing your suit, and it's gonna look like Shabbos and it's gonna feel like Shabbos and you're gonna be with your Shabbos friends. And you're gonna go into it with this perspective and what I'm hoping is going to happen is actually you're going to realize that this did not work. This was not like Shabbos at all. I'm not doing this again because I tried and failed. And like at the very least, I'll know that, okay, I got something out of the experience. It was all right. It wasn't nearly as bad as it could have been because I approached it in this way. But like I'm hoping they'll get on the ladder of I started approaching it in this way and it was okay. But obviously, if my real sincere goal here is having a good Shabbos experience, this is not the ideal way to do it. And I'm going to find some other better way. And I'm explicitly hoping that this is a bridge to a better and fuller way of observing Shabbos. But there is the other side. And like I said, and part of the impulse here is, just saying these things are completely off limits. Anything that's not Torah and mitzvos or going to a shir is off limits on Shabbos is both not going to be effective in the short term or the long term, and also again isn't true. I think like internal to the halachic sources is this grappling with secular, profane, whole weekday pleasures are just a part of what Shabbos is and should be for us, and we're going to have to think reflectively, critically, but like proactively about what it should look like to incorporate those kinds of experiences, even when they're not as threatening to our Shabbos environment as a football game.
To what extent do you think it's important to place this as one piece in a much broader picture, which I think is more superficially evident in a secular college campus, but is real and present in every single Jew's life? We realize that we're human beings, and what it means to be human beings is you could call them shortcomings, but really it's just we always have room to improve on things. So at this stage in our lives, there are certain things that we have to improve on and think about. And from one perspective, they are shortcomings, but really the goal is to understand that this is where you are, and to understand that, there's a place further down the road that I want to get to.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And again, like even the source in the Yerushalmi I quoted, Bekoshi hitir chachamim ledaber Shabbos, like it only with great difficulty do the rabbis allow speaking on Shabbos. It's like that's an extreme formulation. There's this underlying ideal. If only we were purely spiritual beings, like that's what that's what we should aspire to, and that's what Chazal want from us. That's what Hashem wants from us on some level. But then immediately, this is the most ancient layer of our tradition that we have access to. Immediately is the recognition that no, but we're human beings. And it becomes not just a concession. It's not just, well, you're so pathetic that we need to let you talk on Shabbos. As the tradition develops in the Masorah, it becomes, well, no, actually, we want you to enjoy yourself because you're a human being. And that's going to be a part of the Torah isn't given to angels. It's given to actual human beings. It's given to us. And so we need to figure out as human beings how to maintain that transcendent horizon in ways that are actually productive and actually good for us as human beings. Like we need to have normal experiences, and that's recognized and even to some extent like celebrated. Like this is a part of what we should be doing. And then so even within the frame of like, yes, we're all very much human beings. There's no thought of we're going to be angels here. That's not on the table. The question is just like gradations of how much are we conceding to our humanity. And again, this is my approach. This has been my approach. I don't know. Maybe it's just wrong. Maybe I should just say, don't go to this stupid game. It's just obviously incompatible with Shabbos. Don't do it. And I'm not telling you anything beyond that. But no, like my approach has been, no, I am going to tell you what I think the ideal is. But I'm also going to acknowledge and respect that that's not where you are right now for all kinds of reasons, primarily social. You're 20 and you're a part of this like really unique university community that you really cherish and value. And it's a precious resource. You only got this for 4 years and you want to be a part of it. And it means a lot to you. And just we both know you're going to go to this game. So again, I can just leave you hanging with no spiritual guidance at all. My approach is no. Let's help you think about how to like take on the task of doing this in a way that is actually maybe on some minimal baseline level spiritually productive, or at least proactive. Like you're really working on this and you're thinking about what's at stake. And as we said, like you'll be sensitive to the failure if you fail, which you will, and that'll mean something to you also. And set you up for success both in the short term and the long term, and like moving in the right direction.
And it's really wonderful to talk about these important and fundamental ideas and attitudes and approaches to making decisions that are difficult, and trying to maintain this balance where we can accept where we are and continue to grow. And your Yale students are lucky to have you.
Thanks. And this really, I'll just say to conclude, like, it is one very specific thing, very focused thing. But I think this is so much of what we do with JLIC. Again, like our students are in these complicated situations, and they've chosen that. Like JLIC doesn't officially. We don't take a position on. Students ask me, should I go to YU? Should I go to Yale? I'll help them talk it through. But we're not saying people should do this. But students are doing this. They are here, and so we at JLIC we need to be here for them, and we need to meet them where they are and help them move in the right directions. And we're not, and it's not from the perspective of like pity or even just remedial. We're not saying you've made a bad decision, we're going to help you. We're not saying that either. No, it's like there's real respect, real care, and real understanding. This is where you actually are. And given where you actually are, what can we do that's spiritually productive moving forward? And my experience has been students actually can do really amazingly spiritually productive things out of these kinds of predicaments. So thanks, Don.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alex.
Also, I just want to add, just for the record, it is important that everybody know that Yale trounced Harvard again for the 4th year in a row this year. Yeah.
They should have been wearing suits.
Seriously.